Greetings all, Shane Bruce, Restomod Daisy here. Today we're going to do a little video about shot tubes. Now shot tubes are an integral part of Daisy air guns, especially Red Ryders and such, because this is a device that actually allows you to get a BB loaded into your gun and fire it out of the gun. Shot tube has got some pretty standard component parts the way Daisy built them anyway. You've got the muzzle end. This goes on the end of the muzzle. If your gun is not a lightning loader equipped Daisy, it will have a small piece of metal that covers the hole that you use to load the gun with. Then down here we have the guts of the system. You've got a retaining spring. The BBs actually will feed in through this channel and then lodge down in there, and this small spring prevents it from traveling down the barrel. When the gun's inverted, it's trapped behind that. Now in the firing cycle, your shot tube that's attached to the plunger, when you release the trigger, will roar up the compression chamber, knock the BB out of the way, and deliver a pulse of air. And that's what actually fires the gun. So these shot tubes are common to older Daisies. The newer guns have done away completely with the bottle caps. That's what these are called, because it has what appears to be a bottle cap on one end, and they're designed to thread into the abutment washer at the front end of the compression chamber. Now you'll notice that all of these shot tubes we're going to look at today, the older shot tubes, have a couple of threads on the end. And the rationale for that was that it would thread into the abutment washer, but once it turned past the thickness of the abutment washer, it would just spin freely. This was, I suppose, a design feature that allowed the user, typically a young lad with not much sense, to screw his bottle cap into his gun, load his gun, and then merrily shoot away without having to worry about screwing it in too far and seizing it. Now, these are mechanical transitions, threads and bolts. The abutment washer in the top of the compression chamber is a little bit less than a 1/4 inch thick piece of steel with the appropriate threads cut in it. And it is not unusual for these guns to be over-torqued during the installation process or the removal process if there's too much rust. What I'm looking at right now is you'll see the little bit of spring that serves as a retainer fits into a hole here in the shot tube. And if you look closely, with my cell phone skills not really being up to par, you'll notice a line that runs from that hole all the way to the muzzle. That's because all of these shot tubes were seamed tubes. They were not seamless. And as a result of that, over time, they can be warped and lose velocity. So you'll see some speed dropping off the gun. It's not going to give you that 350 as advertised. It'll give you 275, and some of the older guns with sack springs and other issues, even less. Now this is an interesting example of things that can happen with the old shot tube. You'll notice that the spring is missing on this gun. And it apparently has had a little bit of stress in its life because the spring mount holes are not lined up anymore. And as we follow the seam down this shot tube, we will see that this shot tube has in fact been twisted. So this is a candidate for a young lad who got a little angry with his BB gun for whatever reason and just torqued the squeeze out of it. You'll note that the shield that channels the BBs into the port is deformed as well. Now I've seen some messed up shot tubes, but this one's that's about the worst I've ever seen. Now there's two ways to tell if the shot tube you've got is going to fit your gun. If you've got a shot tube without a flange, and by flange I mean these are shot tubes with flanges. These are set up for the lightning loader system, because that's the loading system Daisy devised where you actually can cut a pretty good wad of BBs in your hand and feed them down that small tube that's underneath the Red Ryder, the number 111 Model 40, and the Model 111, and several other designs by Daisy that use this style of bottle cap with the flange, lightning loader style. But Daisy built a bunch of guns that did not have a lightning loader. The two short ones in front of us here are basically designed to fit the 102s, 103s, the Bucks, the little tiny guns that Daisy built for truly small shooters. They are not as long as the shot tubes for the rest of the Daisy line. There are other guns that were bottle cap guns that were not lightning loaders. The Model 96, Model 97, Model 99, and a variety of other wide frame guns that didn't have the lightning loader feature, so they have these buttons. You'll notice that some of these shot tubes have buttons a little further back. Some have, and this one down front has one a little closer. These are all designed for different wide-body daisies. They all share the commonality, though, of, once again, a seamed tube, a spring retainer, a feed channel, and a partially threaded mount at the back so you can get it in the abutment washer. So there's a bunch of different daisies, a bunch of different flavors. All the bottle caps share these commonalities, though. And one of the things with daisies, when you're starting to look at daisies, is occasionally you'll run into one that appears not to be seamed. But don't be deceived. Basically everything I've ever taken apart had a seamed shot tube, and this loses velocity. So here we have examples of wide body bottle cap daisies without the lightning loader tab. Here we have an example of the small gun daisies, the 102s, the 103s, that didn't have a lightning loader. The next batch we're going to look at are shot tubes for the Model 25s. Now, the older guns, you'll see quite a bit of variation in how they're built. But once again, it's the same basic system. You've got a spring retainer, partially threaded abutment washer, and then you've got a spring feed. Now, the cool thing about the spring-fed daisies is these hold 50 BBs at a time, but you do not have to invert the gun. You don't have to get the muzzle up to allow gravity to feed your 600 BBs down to the loading gate, so you can hopefully get one in for the next shot you're going to fire, because this spring does the job for you. Now, in the Model 25 shot tubes, what I've seen is they are not seamless per se, but they have rolled the seam over. I'm going to try it. There we go. They have rolled the seam over so that there's some overlap, so that the gap present in most of the other bottle caps is not present in a Model 25. And the Model 25s were the real speed horses of the Daisy line. They were reputed to be the fastest of the Daisies, except for some of the original, the older number 111 Model 40s that had a very stout spring. So these guys were the speed kings. If you had a Model 25, you were riding tall. So this is the spring retainer clip. Daisy made transitions on the Model 25s to the magnetic pickup later. This is a transitional model. You'll notice it has two pins that secure the aluminum body to the base of the screw. You'll notice that the screws themselves are slightly different. Here we don't have any flats. Here we do. And once again, you still have the same seamed tube with an overlap. A slightly different muzzle end, which is kind of cool looking. I like these because they're depressed that way. They have that little dish. And this is the brand new product, the Chinesium Daisy Model 25. It also has a magnetic pickup. You'll notice it's fully threaded, so this actually will secure pretty solidly to the abutment washer on a Red Ryder, or a 111 Model 40, or 111, any of the older Daisies. You can sub this 50-round spring-loaded magazine shot tube into any of those guns. What you will run into is that there will be a slight gap, because these shot tubes are a bit longer than the lightning loader shot tubes. Not much, but as you can see here, just a little. There's two ways to get around that. You can go with a copper band that takes up the gap, or you can go with two copper bands, one that takes up the gap and one over it that provides you with a broader copper band at the end of the muzzle. Now, what I like about the new shot tube is that these guys add 25 to 30 feet a second to any gun you put them in. And I'm thinking that that is because they are genuinely a seamless tube. They're sealed, so they're sealed very well. There's no gas, there's no air escaping on them. I also think that the additional threading at the base, which allows it to get a more secure bite on the abutment washer, bleeds less air than the standard design that only has a couple of threads. So between those two features, and I got a funny feeling the bore is a little tighter. So actually three things that help make your older Daisy with a Model 25 shot tube with, if you want them, these small modifications to make the fit snug and more attractive, will do a lot more to speed up your vintage Daisy than a lot of other things you can do. Now, down here we have a whole bunch of lightning loader shot tubes, and they all share the same common design elements as the other shot tubes we've looked at. The only exception is the addition of a flange, and this is there strictly to keep your BBs from falling out of your gun. Because with a lightning loader, if you point the muzzle down, those BBs, obeying the laws of gravity, will seek to get closer to the center of the earth. And if that flange wasn't there to cover up the port that you used to load the gun, they'd just come pouring right out. Occasionally, you'll run into one of these that has the lip has been bent. Here's an example of one. Because it didn't quite get close enough to the end of the magazine for the loading to keep the BBs present. These are all pretty much the same spring retaining system. They all are seamed tubes. In other words, they're a wrap tube, not a seamless tube. Some are a little better than others, but they are all the same construction style. And one of the things you want to look at when you're looking at your shot tube to see if it's optimized is you want to make sure that it is as straight as you can get. Some of these will have curves. And as we saw in the short tube up there, some of them were just had the bejesus twisted out of them. That can't be good. The other thing you want to examine is how does the bottle cap look in relation to the shot tube? Is it square with the shot tube, or is it offset, slightly left or slightly right? I've seen all sorts of variations on that thing. Then the optimized older style shot tube, if you insist on keeping it, you want one that's square and straight. You want as small a seam to be visible as possible. Now, most folks don't have a lot of tubes like this to choose from. I do, because I do a lot of work on these guns, and I've processed quite a few of them over the years. And I can tell you the straight ones do shoot somewhat better, but it's a Daisy. It's a smooth bore. They're BB guns. You know, if you get half a beer can of angle at 25, 30 feet, I don't think you got anything to complain about. Just shoot the gun. You know, it'll repeat. It'll get you inside a quarter most of the time if you shoot it enough. Well, anyway, that's an overview of shot tubes and all their wondrous variations. One last thing I'd like to talk about, because here at Restomod we do this. If you take your shot tube and you polish it, you'll discover it's got a bronze ring. That's the method they use to weld the shot tubes to the muzzle caps. And if you polish them up, they look really nice on the gun. And that's what we're all about, is taking old Daisies, like this Model 25, which is a work in progress. It is not shooting yet, but it is starting to look pretty good. And turning them from closet queens into something that folks would like to have out for the public to see. At least in a man cave, anyway. Well, let's see if we'll get a focus here. Can we get a focus? Give me some focus. Focus is achieved. This is Shane Bruce of Restomod Daisy, signing off.